shoot. What up, everybody? How y'all doing? Welcome to the End Zone. We have guest Jay Nokes. Sorry for that little screw up on the broadcast, but I guess sooner is better than later. So we're going to go ahead and start. For today's agenda, we're going to talk about the XFL logo, the head coaches, the direction of the league, and then we're going to take questions. So if y'all want to go ahead and put y'all's questions down below, we can get to those. But first, I want to introduce our guest, Jay. Jay, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Super happy to be on the End Zone. Big time fan of some of the work that you've been doing, man, and definitely keep it up, dude. It's great content, and I love watching it.
Yeah, thank you. And Jay, before we do get started, I know that you are starting your very own podcast talking about the XFL. So want to get that plug in for people who are watching right now.
For sure, man. I appreciate that. The new podcast is actually called XFL Weekly with Jay and my co-host Joe Scanlon, and you can find us on Twitter at XFL Weekly Pod, and you can just follow us there. We're planning on launching in May as we get closer to what is scheduled to be the combine in June, based on some of the reports that have been released so far. So if anything does change, we'll keep you guys updated. But you can follow us there, and we'll get started with this thing in May.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in because we don't have too much time, and we'll cover, I think, what everybody wants to talk about is the XFL logo, the new rebrand. Some people are sour about it, others not so much. What are your takes on it?
Well, my opinion was always that this new ownership group with Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and Jerry Cardinale, they have to get as far as possible away from what was the XFL in 2020 and what was the XFL in 2001. They just wanted to start something fresh, something that's innovative. And I'm always behind something that's clean, something that's fresh, something that this fan base has been asking for. I mean, just think about it like this. Imagine them coming back with that same logo. I think all of us had PTSD from uh, 2020 when the pandemic hit. And it's like, oh my gosh, we made it 5 weeks in and it was a great product, but it stopped short of what it could have been. And when you look at that brand, that kind of reminds you of what it was back in 2020. So I'm a fan of the refresh. I'm a fan of starting with a clean slate and putting out a new brand for fans to recognize and for fans to relate to. So I'm super happy about the change that they decided to go with, especially with the AC/DC track in the background, back in black. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I actually don't mind it. I know that there were a lot of comparisons to Axe body spray, things like that, some memes on the internet. Even Megan Rapinoe, I think that's how you pronounce her name, the U.S. women's soccer player, and her company, was it Together? I think. Well, I didn't think that there were grounds for what she said, but I understand that she has the right to do that and feels that way. I get the Together, the little screenshot of the Together with the X. That makes sense, but I really don't see that going anywhere because there are other companies that have logos similar to theirs. It almost feels like a clout chase for them because they're not really well known. And then when you tie yourself to The Rock in the XFL with hundreds of thousands of followers for the league and then millions with The Rock, it's just that's how I heard about them, and I feel like that's the consensus on the internet.
Yeah, and big time props to Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe. They did build that brand specifically for women, but um, here's my issue with it. If you're going to say that they're taking something from you, well, to a degree, some of the values have to line up, and the logo has to look pretty similar, in my opinion. And honestly, their their plight is that, hey, this guy took something that women created. Well, I don't feel like they did their full homework, because if they did, they would know that Danny Garcia is the chairwoman and co-owner of the XFL, and most of this intellectual stuff, property that's going on, is being planned by her. So I don't really want to get into too much of that, but I thought it was a shocker for sure whenever they released it, and that came out of it. So
Yeah, I thought that was weird too, where they mentioned The Rock but not Garcia. We'll move
mhm.
into the next part, which is the most fun part for me of today's segment: the coaches and the hires from the XFL that we got earlier today on ESPN. I know a lot of people want to talk about ESPN possibly being that thing where the XFL could be on national TV. But let's talk coaches. Were there some coaches? I definitely have my takes, but I want to hear yours on what coaches you liked.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I liked every single last one of the coaching hires. Number one, I love the fact that there is a former player aspect to it. You have Rod Woodson, you have Reggie Barlow, you have Hines Ward, you have all of these guys who have a proven track record of being successful in the NFL within the professional ranks. And I always bring this up because whenever I look at the collegiate landscape of football, you look at Jackson State and what Deion Sanders is doing at that university, revitalizing that whole entire program and the dividends that it has paid for him, as a coach, and also for his staff and the people who work at Jackson State. So I think that, and plus Danny Garcia and The Rock have been very vocal about being diverse and being innovative. So this shouldn't be a big time surprise for a lot of people. This should be exactly on par with what these new owners have promised this XFL fan base. But my favorite one, I got to say, I love the Hines Ward hire, but also as a legacy hire, I love the Bob Stoops hire. Like bringing back Bob Stoops is everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there are two names that I think people are overlooking, maybe because they are famous ball players. But I want to talk about Terrell Buckley first. He was coaching at Ole Miss under
Mhm.
Lane Kiffin most recently. And from what I've heard from inside the program, I also work a lot with college football, kind of separate from this channel. People love Terrell Buckley. And I know that recruiting isn't as much of a factor or will be in pro football, but the sense is that the players love him and that
Mhm.
he's also able to coach. So a lot of people thought that Terrell Buckley could eventually work up the ranks and get a coordinator position somewhere. It's almost like the XFL snagged him and then Hines Ward, who was just recently promoted to Florida Atlantic's wide receiver coaches. Those are two guys who have big names who you might not think of as being coaches, but they have really shot up the ranks, and there are a lot of positive things about them in their coaching career that's kind of overshadowed by their playing career. And I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing because they're incredible players,
Mhm.
but they are really good coaches. And I do want people to see that they have a lot of potential, and there are probably definitely some college programs that would love to have those guys on their coaching staff. Maybe not head coaches because it would be a roll of the dice,
Mhm.
but for sure position or coordinator.
Yeah, and and that's the great thing about this league. It's about giving people opportunities who, quite frankly, deserve those opportunities. You know what I mean? And for me, the Terrell Buckley, and who I think about when I think about Terrell Buckley right off the top is Deion Sanders. I mean, they graduated from the same university. They kind of have the same type of swagger, and players are drawn to them, and they're like magnets for up and coming players, high school players, collegiate players. They want to learn from the best. And Buckley, we all know that his number was retired at Florida State, one of 12 players for that to ever happen to. So I think just having a former player in the locker room will pay so many dividends for these players who are coming into this league, because not only can they learn from the game's best, but also they can be developed and they can be taught how to be true professionals, like they once were in the NFL. Someone just mentioned down here the Woodson hire feels more like the Dion hire. I definitely agree with that. I think Woodson can coach for sure, but more or less, I think that all of the former player hires are influenced by what Deion Sanders has done at Jackson State.
Yeah, it is definitely an unprecedented time we live in because this is really new waters we're headed towards with coaches that are have little experience and having success going and moving up the ranks quickly. Even look at a university like Notre Dame. I'm a Notre
Mhm.
Dame fan. Our head coach is Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman hasn't really been coach. I mean, he's been coaching coordinator positions, and he only had 1 year at coordinator at Notre Dame. All of a sudden, he's a head coach. You're seeing the rise to head coaching much faster. People are willing to take the chance, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that the XFL doing this is really, I guess it's reflecting their ability to be innovative because this is
Mhm.
definitely an innovative part of football that people don't really talk about.
Yeah, 100%. And also, it's in line with the XFL's new four core values that they have. It's collaboration, innovation, those type of things. I mean, you look around, and that's what I love about coaching now. It's not really just a one man show. It's not like, hey, he's the head ball coach and that's all that matters. Now it's more about collaboration. Who can I get on my staff to make this team great? And I feel like that's what the XFL is going for. And we see how that works in the NFL. We also see how it has worked in college football, even with, I would throw out University of Texas with Steve Sarkisian hiring Gary Patterson and getting David Cutcliffe as a consultant. I think all of those things that have been done in the past that they, kind of went into the lab and saw and did their homework and did their research. They saw how effective it has become. So now they want to implement it into what they're doing with the XFL. So I'm really excited about it. Reggie Barlow, yes, Reggie Barlow. Somebody just mentioned Reggie Barlow. Can't forget him. He was one of the most winningest head coaches at Alabama State. Turned that around, and he deserves an opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and then didn't he win a championship with Virginia State?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's not his first rodeo at all.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. These guys are all experienced. The only thing is that they're not experienced in some of these Power Five schools, and that's okay. To some people, these aren't the sexy hires, but in my opinion, these are the effective hires, and this
Mhm.
is what you want your players to feel comfortable with. It's all about relatability once you get to the professional ranks.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue into the hires that are really attractive. And I know we mentioned Bob Stoops, so we'll talk about him first. Obviously, returning to the XFL, possibly a Dallas team. Maybe we'll see what happens. But this is a home run hire. I mean, there's no way around it.
Yeah, 100%. Home run hire. He was the first coach that they hired back in 2019 when they started ramping up for the 2020 season for the XFL. You had to bring back Stoops. Why? Because he's just a legend. Number two, he is one that attracts people to the stadium. I covered the Dallas Renegades in the first rendition of the XFL, and I actually got to go to these games in person. And the reason why the attendance averaged around 17,000 was purely because of Bob Stoops. No one knew who was on this team besides Landry. Like, we knew who Landry Jones was, we knew who Cameron Artis Payne was, we knew who Jeff Badette was, but really what attracted people to Globe Life Field was Bob Stoops, and he was a fantastic hire. They went 2-3 through the first 5 weeks. I do think that he'll definitely switch some things up with this go around, but he is a home run hire, and they had to bring him back if they wanted to see some type of success. So I'm glad that Stoops is back. That's for sure.
And again, the 2-3 record is a bit misleading. Had he not
Mhm.
had injuries to the quarterback position, Landry Jones, the most important position on the field, things would look different because the offense was pretty solid with him in. And then did they go to Steven Nelson after that and it just kind of fell off? I
Yeah,
believe.
they went to a Philip Nelson
Philip
who
Nelson.
averaged 4.3 yards per attempt. And you go and you look at Landry Jones's stats. Landry Jones averaged close to 70 yards per attempt. So when you go down in that type of average, you can expect some slow starts, especially in football. And you're right. I mean, if you go back to that New York Guardians game as well, I mean, they were in the game. Landry Jones had them in a scoring position, but he got injured on the second to last play of the third quarter, and in comes Philip Nelson with the short field to work on, and he throws an interception. So I agree 100%. That 2-3 record was not indicative of what type of team that he had.
Yeah, totally 100% agree. And then we got to talk about Wade Phillips. This one, when Mike Mitchell reported his name, I looked at that and I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Wade Phillips, widely known as one of the greatest defensive coordinators, one of the greatest defensive minds in NFL history. That Wade Phillips in the XFL.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about how that came to be, or just how?
I don't know how all these hires came to be. Let me just be upfront and frank about that. I definitely don't know how they came to be, but I do know that Wade Phillips is a proven head coach, and he deserves another chance. I am a Dallas Cowboys fan, hardcore, and he was the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, 07 and 08, and I actually sent him a message today, and I told him that I was a big fan of his whenever I was a teenager. But bringing him into the XFL just brings a lot more credibility as well. I mean, we saw defensive minds like Winston Moss who succeeded with the LA Wildcats. I mean, he even had Pepper Johnson as his defensive coordinator, who's a Super Bowl champion. So I think bringing a guy like Wade Phillips into the fold, who's more of a defensive mind, you kind of know which team he's. I mean, I think this is my personal opinion. I think he's built for the Houston market. That's just my thing. He's built perfectly for the Houston market. His dad, Bum Phillips, was a head coach for the Houston Oilers, and you know that he's going to get the best out of any players that he gets on the defensive side. So Wade Phillips, home run hire as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at. Maybe there's a little bit of hiring strategy that is different between the XFL and the USFL. USFL going with a lot of proven college coaches and a lot of offensive minds. Whereas the XFL, it does feel like we're getting some more diverse football guys because we have the player coaches. We have some of the coaches like Stoops who we know are winners, and we have defensive minds. And it sounded like one of the selling points of the XFL USFL, excuse me, was to be incredibly offensive minded. And that was one of their attractions. So it's going to be interesting to see how the XFL, I guess the playing is offensive wise, because I know that's what everybody wants to see. Everyone wants to see the offense.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody wants to see, especially with how Houston played in the first rendition. The Houston Roughnecks were one of the best offensive teams in the XFL. The LA Wildcats started a fire at the end of the season before the league actually suspended operations. I do think that this is going to be one of those offensive leagues, but also it's always nice to throw a defensive mastermind into the mix to muddy up all the offense's plans. So I think again, man, I think Wade Phillips is just going to be one of those guys who's going to bring a different type of intensity to this next rendition of the XFL.
Yeah, so we're coming up short on time here, but we're going to answer these questions before we go. So question number 1, it's on the board. And I'll let you go ahead and answer those. And once you leave, I'll stay on after and answer anyone else's question because I know we're pressed for time.
For sure, man. That sounds great.
So I got the question up front. It's the way recruiting services are so prevalent now. Do you see a day when the XFL teams are signing players right out of high school who'd prefer to get paid while developing for the NFL?
Hey, that's a great question. Thank you so much, ZH. You know what? Whenever I do think about innovation for the XFL, I also think about the G League in basketball and what they did with that Ignite program. I don't think it's too far gone to think that the XFL could possibly get players out of high school or with a player with 3 years left of eligibility in the NCAA. Actually, in 2020, there was a player who did play for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Robinson was his last name. Kenny Robinson. He was actually drafted by the Panthers in 2020 because the NFL GMs loved his tape, all the tape that he put out there for those 5 games. So Kenny Robinson was actually a freshman at West Virginia. And the XFL hit him up and was like, hey, look, do you want to play in professional football? He opted in and he decided to play. Next thing you know, he's being drafted in the NFL in April's draft. So, yes, I do think that it could potentially be a chance that they could take players, not out of high school, I would say freshmen in college, to give them a way to support their families early.
All right. So next question. Do you think the LA Wildcats should move to San Diego or Oakland instead of Las Vegas, as it is rumored?
All right. So those things are not confirmed yet. Everything is still fluid. So I'm not too sure of what the cities are and what the markets will be because that has not been announced and I have not been told anything. But if this was, hypothetically speaking, if the LA Wildcats should move, I do think that either San Diego or Oakland do deserve a team because the Oakland Raiders are no longer there. They moved to Las Vegas. San Diego lost the Chargers 4, 5, 6 years back. Um, I definitely think that the Wildcats, if they do come back, they should move to San Diego or Oakland instead of Vegas. But hey, it's a sports book world. Everybody's all about betting in sports, so Vegas isn't a bad market to be in, especially if you want to garner up some revenue outside of the ticket sales and the marketing that you have planned.
Okay, I'm looking for more questions that are XFL related, and I'm trying to find some. Daryl Johnson says, "Jay, you working out?"
Yeah, man, I actually do work out. This shirt's actually kind of big. Since 2020, I know that there's people out there on Twitter that actually follow me and actually care about my content. But since 2020, I lost 65 pounds. So I'm actually 194. This shirt just doesn't show it. It's not the best shirt. It's kind of baggy, but it's my lounge shirt.
Congratulations, man. I also work out a lot and lost a lot of weight. So I know the grind.
Oh man, it's all about commitment. It's all about determination. It gets tough sometimes, but hey man, once you're committed to it, it makes it a whole lot easier. But Daryl, I appreciate that question, my man.
All right, so final question before Jay leaves, and reminder, I'll be staying on to talk more XFL and USFL. I know the hype around the USFL is high right now. So, do you think they should have picked more former XFL 2020 coaches?
I mean, that's up for debate. I mean, fans are not fans of change. Everybody likes familiarity. So, I mean, there's mixed opinions on that. Some people wanted to see all the old head coaches come back, but I have to tell you that Mark Trestman, and some of those coaches just weren't that attractive to this new ownership group, to be honest with you. So I don't think that they should have picked more. I think that, I mean, let's take it back. I think Pep Hamilton, if he was available, he should definitely get a position. If Winston Moss, I don't know if he's available. I think he should have been in this. But also, this was a culture change. This was the passing of the guard. This is something completely fresh, something completely new, and they had to make a change. The only change that they thought that would cost them money and some fanship obviously would have been not bringing Bob Stoops back. So that's why they brought him back, just because of the type of demand that he renders. So I think they did a great job. I do wish and I do hope that those former coaches get an opportunity eventually coaching football. Who knows? They may be coordinators in the XFL. Who knows?
All right, Jay. Well, if you have anything else, again, there are more people in right now, so plug your podcast one last time before you get off, and we'll talk USFL after that.
For sure, my man. So we're coming out with a podcast called XFL Weekly Pod. You can follow us on Twitter, XFL Weekly Pod, XFL Weekly Pod. Check us out. We'll be launching in May of this year, right before the combine in June for the XFL. We're trying to bring on some hard hitting guests, some players. We're going to have some fun with this thing. So, yes, the XFL Weekly Pod, and it's also at XFL Weekly Pod. So, be sure to check us out. We're going to get started in May, and we're super excited about the start.
All right, Jay, I enjoyed having you on. I have a question for you. Are you going to watch some USFL action this Easter weekend?
Whew, man. You know, I've been kind of bullish on the USFL. I have my own opinions about that, but football is football. I'm not a football snob. I've been saying that for quite some time. I love football, so more than likely I'll catch some USFL. Hell, I've been watching spring games for the past 2 weeks, so I think I can stomach some USFL football.
All right. Well, you have a great one. I enjoyed having you on. Can I get a Go Stallions before you leave?
Hey, go Stallions! There we go. But I'm more of a Stars guy because my guy is playing quarterback for that team.
Oh, let's
Brian
go.
Scott.
Let's go. Yeah, I actually, real quick, I met him the other day at my lacrosse practice. He was throwing on our fields.
He's a great guy, man. He's a great guy. He's a really good guy. He reached out to me before, and we connected last year during the pandemic. So he's a great guy. I wish him the best. But I'm gonna say go Stallions, and I'll also say go Stars.
All right, you have a good one, Jay.
You too, man. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. All right, guys. So we are continuing with the show, and now we're going to shift over. Y'all put y'all's questions down below. It's hard to scroll up, so if I missed them. I know there's a question, I think it was from Ryan, about the Generals. I believe it was. I'm going to have to find it. Can you repost that question in the comments section? But yeah, really excited for the USFL weekend. By the way, if anyone in here, let me know if you're going to be at the games this weekend. I definitely will 100% be at the Sunday games. I may not be able to make it to the opener Saturday night, which kind of stinks, although it is going to rain, it looks like. But nevertheless, very, very excited for week 1 of the United States Football League. I've been kind of sneaking on, watching some of the practices from afar, and I'm just really pumped. So it looks like we got a super chat. RC from NYC. What's up, everyone? Hope all are well. First time on this channel. I go back to the He Hate Me XFL, which was weird. The 2020 XFL is so refreshing, and I hope that this version can keep the momentum going. I definitely think that it will. I think that, fans are definitely antsy for something new and something different. And a lot of people had personal connections to XFL 2020, and when they see change, they might freak out a little. But once football is actually on the field, I think everybody's going to enjoy the product. All right, Ryan, thanks for posting that question. Can the Generals win 6 games and sneak in to the playoffs? Well, I guess I got to change the background to, hold up, you're going to like this, to the Generals player. So I guess we're switching over to the USFL now. Let me kind of pull up something real quick. So in the Northern Division, this will load. You have the Generals, the Stars, the Maulers, and the Panthers. I think for most people, this is the tougher division, I would say, because there's a lot of hype around the Stars. The Panthers, I think they're favored by Vegas to win it all right now. And then the Maulers are kind of up in the air. Some people don't really know what to expect from them, including me. I think it's going to be hard, especially in that competitive division. I think that the USFL, getting the leagues mixed up, is going to be tougher to win. I think if they were in another division, the only other division, the South, it would be more wide open. But again, there's no telling how far they could go. And, they could end up not needing to win 6 games. They could end up winning way more than 6, I'm just saying, theoretically, we really don't know how any of this is going to play out. And I would say if you're a Generals fan, shoot for second or third, because I have the Stars as the favorite, and I'm not as high on the Michigan Panthers. Again, this is preseason. We really don't know what to expect from anyone. All right, looking for next questions. Will the USFL go beyond the original teams from the 80s? That's an interesting one right there. It all depends really on the lawsuit going on right now, if they have the rights to. But I wouldn't be mad at them going for some original identities. I liked some of the identities in the Spring League. I know that they're not really connected, but they kind of are. They're like step brothers or whatever. I wouldn't mind them going to some new stuff, you know? New stuff is always fun. Yeah, Jared said, wouldn't they have to go 6-6 or 6-5 in 12 weeks? Well, it's a 10-week season. So 12 is with the playoffs included, I believe. Double check. Yeah, it's a 10-week season. So 6 could definitely make it, but they'd have to beat all of their teams in their division to get through there. Do y'all have any more questions? Y'all keep posting questions down below. We have our USFL preview coming tomorrow. That's going to be pretty fun. I'm really excited. And we can talk a little bit more XFL if y'all would like to. But before I get off, I want y'all to guide the conversation. Again, with the XFL coaching hires, I thought that they were all really, really good. Just reading through the comments. Yes. RC from NYC. The Small Potatoes documentary is an excellent documentary. You can also read some literature. Football for a Buck is an incredible read by, I believe it's Jeff Pearlman. Something like that. Really, really good book. I guess real quick, I do want to talk about my XFL cities wish list. And I have a question for y'all. How do y'all feel about 3 teams in Texas? The Dallas, Houston, San Antonio situation. 3 of the 8 teams being in the state of Texas. We know Texas loves football, but how do people outside of Texas feel? I know how you Texans feel about having more football inside of Texas in the spring. You got to love it, but what about outside? And then also Vegas. If I were working for the XFL, I would have targeted San Diego. Would have thought that would be an incredible location to move the Los Angeles team. LA is definitely a tough market, but I would have thought that would have been the direction. Again, these are just rumors. So I guess it doesn't really matter to act like it's set in stone. Oklahoma City, that's another good one. When I worked for the Freedom Football League, we had plans for the Oklahoma City team. And as long as San Antonio gets a team, in the Alliance of American Football, if y'all weren't with the channel when we were talking AAF, back when the end zone was the AAF zone, that's a throwback. San Antonio was the heart and soul, it felt like, of the USFL. But you definitely have to have a team in San Antonio. Let's just say that. And I wouldn't mind 3 teams in Texas if each team could get around $20K per game and keep that attendance up. And that's just my 2 cents on it. If 3 teams in Texas makes the XFL work, then I'm perfectly fine with it. Yeah, a couple people saying they don't want Vegas. I'll put this one up. Jared doesn't want Vegas. It's getting overrun with a lot of teams. And what stadium would they play at? I was thinking about that. They cannot play. You wouldn't think they would play in that big old brand new NFL stadium. Also, Formula One is coming to Vegas. I want to go to that. I love me some F1 racing. That would be really fun to watch. Ooh, we have an Mlfb question from Mason. Will the Mlfb be this spring or next spring? It will be this spring. That's the plan. That is the plan, to get the Mlfb up and running. I'm sure they're working very hard behind the scenes, and because they're publicly traded, there's a way they have to go about announcing things. So they probably have things already set in store. We know 3 of the 4 coaches. I'm waiting on the 4th so I can do a full coaching video. Been kind of waiting for that for a while. And I do know the store is supposed to come out, I think this week, possibly Friday. It was supposed to come out last week, but they got $7.5 million, something like that. All right, my computer's on 10%, so we're going to go. Until then, let's talk USFL because we have the games coming up. I want y'all's USFL questions right before we log off. First of all, will anyone be at the USFL games? Anyone in the chat? I've seen a lot of comments. And I've got to post, I guess, what I'm going to wear because really nobody knows what I looks like. Oh, here's a great question. Jared, worst mascot in the USFL? Easy. The Philly Stars. I don't know what that mascot is, but it's awful. I hate it. It's scary. As a child, I would not want to be near that thing. I don't know what that thing is. USFL American Forces Network will also carry games. That's cool. I guess I was in the tweet from earlier, but you always love to see that, supporting the troops, giving them some football to watch. That's pretty fun. What do you think of the bubble they created for the USFL season? So RC from NYC. I think I read that you're a newcomer to the show. I love you already, man. You're posting so many questions. Love it. And what do you think of the bubble they created for the USFL season? Well, it's complicated, timing wise, because of this disease that's been going around. I know we're kind of on the end of it, but I think the bubble is a safe way to do it. You're not spending a lot of money, and it's proven with the history of the Spring League. If y'all do not know, the Spring League was a league run by Brian Woods, who basically started the United States Football League, the new USFL, and he ran this Spring League. It was on TV. It was on FS1. That's how this relationship was really created. And they did it in bubbles, and it got a lot of people watching football that wasn't really advertised. So I think the bubble for year 1, great idea, great option, saves so much money. Year 2 and year 3, though, you got to move out of the bubble. I think after year 2, especially like if the XFL, and I don't buy the XFL going into a bubble. I know people have been spreading that rumor around the internet. Mike Mitchell mentioned that they were talking about it, but I don't think they're really serious. I think if I'm a betting man, they're definitely going to cities. If the XFL is in cities and the USFL is not in cities, it's just not going to look good, especially if the USFL had a head start. That's all I will say. All right. Favorite mascot? Well, I got to go with the Birmingham Stallions. Birmingham Stallions, of course. Jared, I kind of covered this. What will happen if they continue to stay in the bubble? I think people will still watch because it's football, but you might lose a couple fans and you might gain some criticism. I don't think it would be too hard of a hit, but you can't be in a bubble forever. You got to get out in the real world. What do I think about the NFL being involved with both the USFL and the XFL? This is the last question. Okay, well, this will be the last question I cover, but I'm going to go over these questions before. So, Ryan, I have a question. Are you mad at me for the Stallions being my least favorite teams? Totally. Nah, just kidding. Everyone can love their own teams. I'm excited to watch Magoo, though. Are there any updates with the lawsuit with the USFL? Not that I know of. But there's been a lot of news lately, so it could have gotten buried under there. And then Joe Is Texas getting 3 teams? We do not know yet. The rumor is Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. We know we're getting San Antonio, pretty much. The other 2, we're at least getting 1 of the other 2. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to a question. So this is the final question I'll end on, and welcome to my TED Talk, because this one might take a couple minutes, even though I only have like 9% on my computer. But no, I'm not angry or discontent with the NFL working with, wait, there it is. It's actually from Little Bitty Customs. I'm not mad or really super opinionated on this topic, but I know a lot of people are. Let me say this. First of all, the first XFL deal with the National Football League, it's really just getting referees, and they're working with referees, possibly getting some coaches through. It feels like a step in the direction of working alongside each other, but it's still not really. You know, it doesn't make the league a G League, if you will, or a minor league for the NFL at all. And then the next topic I know everyone wants to talk about is the National Football Alumni Association with their little combine that they have up in Canton, Ohio, where they basically train and work out with free agents. That's not the National Football League. It's a nonprofit that's run by the alumni from the NFL and coaches from the NFL. And it's just working with players so that they're ready to play. And really, this does nothing for the NFL. It really does a ton for the XFL, because it's basically a way to have guys automatically opt in to the XFL to come down and play. And from the XFL, and I can't speak for 3.0, but for 2.0, I believe when you sign contracts, they were for multiple years and you would have to get out of them, almost like the CFL. So they're going to sign players to keep and to stay. I wouldn't be worried at all about the XFL becoming a feeder league. They'll collaborate with the NFL, sure. And people like to point out, well, then everyone's going to see the XFL as a developmental football league. Well, newsflash, people see NCAA football as a developmental football league for the NFL. I mean, everything under the NFL is, you hear people about high school football talking about how much they want to get to the NFL. There's no way around that, and I'm on 4%. I wish I could talk about it more. My computer's literally about to die. But no, wouldn't be worried. There's nothing wrong with it. It helps everyone. And like they said in the videos, it builds up the ecosystem. All right, my computer is literally about to die. I'm going to go ahead and log off. Thank you all for watching and joining. We're going to start live streaming more often, and it's going to be really fun. Thanks for watching the End Zone. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment as always so we can move the chains.